Welcome to the channel about news from around the world. While you subscribe and like it, we're going to start.
In the short term, the conflict with Brussels meant very little to Budapest and Warsaw. Moreover, it helped Viktor Orban and his Fidesz party to win a convincing election in April 2022. In the medium term, however, the bureaucratic delays invented by the European Commission and the political forces behind it have put the Hungarian authorities at a severe disadvantage. Since December last year, the EU Council has frozen EU funds owed to Hungary. Around €28 billion has been withheld, €22 billion from the Cohesion Fund and €6 billion for the implementation of a national economic recovery plan. This was such a sensitive loss to the country's budget, especially given the spike in energy and food prices, the unstable economic situation and the upsurge in strikes, that Budapest had to quickly accept Brussels' conditions. It agreed with the European Commission on 27 blocks of measures, which it demanded be implemented in order to unblock the funds. The Hungarian government clearly followed the requirements in preparing the legislative package promised by the European Commission. At the beginning of May 2023, the Hungarian parliament promulgated it. After the parliament approved the legal acts ensuring the judicial reform along the lines of the institutions of the integration bloc, representatives of the EU expert community noted with satisfaction that Viktor Orban and his government are on the way back to the rule of law. At the same time, they considered the measures to liberalize Hungarian legislation to be only a first step in the right direction. In their estimation, echoed by the European NGOs, the initial measures are not sufficient to meet all the demands made on Budapest. Hungary will need to convince the EU that proper implementation of judicial reform is indeed taking place. After all, a real bailout of the judiciary, as Brussels hopes, will tie the hands of the Fidesz bosses, activists and functionaries. In case the institutions of the European Union positively assess the judicial reform in Hungary, 85% of the financial resources allocated to it will be unblocked. If Budapest removes provisions from the child protection law that Brussels considers discriminatory against LGBT, amend legislation qualified by EU institutions as infringing on academic freedoms, review regulations and policies on receiving asylum seekers and refugees that it deems incompatible with alliance policies in this field. In order to receive the funds, Budapest will have to submit a request for payment each time. The final decision rests with the EU Council. Naturally, Budapest is trying to brag and pretend to get by without the money it is owed. According to the government's plans, the focus will be on attracting direct investment. Budapest is also counting on self-financing. At the same time, it cares about reducing its debt burden. For example, the Hungarian government has successfully negotiated with PJSC Gazprom to defer payments for 3 years. According to the Hungarian Minister of Economic Development, the forint gets a protective umbrella and additional quantities of the energy that the economy needs so much. Hungary's financial and economic relations with China, Turkey, the Persian Gulf countries and Central Asia, in particular Uzbekistan, and the Transcaucasus are developing dynamically. But the Hungarian leadership is in reality in an extremely difficult, financially dependent position. Exit is dictated not by them but by Brussels. Furthermore, it has to act with a view to the still pro-European mood of the electorate. According to opinion polls in mid-2023, the majority of the population, strange as it may seem given the standoff between Hungary's ruling elite and EU institutions, has a positive view of what the integration alliance is doing. Such blackmail could eventually affect Hungary's foreign policy. After all, for some reason Budapest, which has often publicly opposed the extension of restrictions on Russia, has nevertheless voted behind closed doors in favor of the already 11 sanctions packages. The conflict between the core and Brussels-based European Union bureaucracy on the one hand and the Hungarian leadership, ruling parties and majority of the population on the other has a long history. According to the image that the EU attributes to Hungary, unlike all the other member states, they are no longer full-fledged democracies. However, the EU has been collecting complaints about Hungary's conservative leadership since the early 2010s. However, the Union was in no hurry to take enforcement action against the bad boy. The reason for this restraint was that Budapest did not directly violate the decisions agreed at the EU level. The situation changed dramatically when the Union was faced with a migration crisis. The Visegrad Quartet stubbornly rejected any migrant distribution scheme. Eventually, the EU core had had enough of their obstruction. Against this background, Brussels, at the peak of the pandemic, developed a conditionality mechanism. Its essence is to force member states to adhere to the common line by suspending their funding from European funds until legislation and law enforcement practices are brought in line with the normative foundations of the Union. Formally, the mechanism has been operating as part of the EU legal system since January 2021, but for several months Hungary has managed to delay its practical implementation, thereby triggering another conflict with the Brussels bureaucracy.
Thank you for watching. If you're interested, subscribe and leave a comment.